Thank you so much for coming. Floor is yours. Zach Graves is on deck. Daniel Schumann in the hole.
Good afternoon, Chairman Ryan.
Thank you.
I'm Femi Cadmus, President of the American Association of Law Libraries. I know my name's difficult to pronounce.
That's all right.
I'm honored to have the opportunity today to testify about the essential role of the Government Publishing Office, the GPO, and the Library of Congress in supporting a strong democracy. The American Association of Law Libraries is the only national association dedicated to the legal information profession and its professionals. AALL members serving our communities rely on the GPO, the Library of Congress, and the Law Library of Congress for access to and preservation of official, trustworthy government information. Adequate funding for these agencies ensures access to information, which supports access to justice and preserves the rule of law. I will start with funding for the GPO. The American Association of Law Libraries urges full funding for GPO's Public Information Programs account that supports the Federal Depository Library Program, FDLP. The requested funding level of $31.3 million will allow GPO to provide additional support for locating and processing federal information for inclusion in the FDLP and the cataloging and indexing program. GPO administers the FDLP by providing federal government information products in multiple formats to more than 1,100 participating libraries across the country and in your districts. Approximately 200 law libraries participate in the FDLP, including my very own institution, Duke University School of Law, J. Michael Goodson Law Library. The J. Michael Goodson Law Library is open to the public and celebrated its 40th year as a selective depository library in 2018. WALL also supports full funding for the Congressional Publishing Appropriation and Revolving Fund so that the GPO may continue to publish legislative information and support the development of govinfo.gov to add new collections and improve accessibility. Next, I'd like to discuss funding for the Library of Congress. WALL is grateful to the subcommittee for its approval of recent requests from the library for its physical and technology needs. AALL naturally has a special interest in the Law Library of Congress. The Law Library is a treasured institution with an unparalleled collection of legal material. AALL supports the Law Library's $18 million request for FY 2020 so that it may complete projects including archiving global legal research reports and continuing and expanding its digitization efforts. The American Association of Law Libraries also urges continued investment in the development of congress.gov. We commend the Library of Congress for updating its information technology operations and meeting nearly all of the recommendations in the Government Accountability Office's 2015 report on the library's information technology. We also express appreciation for recent modernization efforts in the Copyright Office. The Copyright Office has been working in close coordination with the Library of Congress's Office of the Chief Information Officer. We welcome Dr. Hayden's recent appointment of Karen A. Temple as the new Register of Copyrights, and we're confident the office's modernization will continue under her able leadership. In conclusion, I want to thank you once again for the opportunity to testify before the subcommittee. The American Association of Law Libraries urges you to approve as close to full funding as possible for the GPO and the Library of Congress. Thank you, and I welcome any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We appreciate the testimony. This is obviously a very important function for Congress and the government, so we appreciate you coming up and giving your voice and your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Zach Graves, Head of Policy from the Lincoln Network. Morning, sir.
Hi. Chairman, it's good to be back here. Came before you last year to also talk about this issue of building science and technology expertise in the Congress, and we just had two members come and talk about it. I'm hoping to pick it up from a little bit of a different angle, picking off from where we started in the FY 2019 bill, which had two important provisions to, one, create a study that was executed by the National Academy of Public Administration, which is still in progress and set to be out in October. And the other was the elevation of the GAO's STAA office, which Chairman Takano mentioned. And I know there's still some debate within the Congress about which of these offices is best suited to take up the role of, building greater science and technology expertise in Congress and doing technology assessment work in particular. Rather than try and answer that question, I want to talk about some history around the GAO's office and some features that I think would be important to build in it should the Congress decide to sort of pursue that as the primary vehicle. In particular, I think it's notable that while there's been a lot of talk of reviving the OTA recently, that this is not a new idea or a recent phenomenon. There's been efforts to recreate OTA ever since they defunded it. In fact, in 1995, the year it was defunded, there was an effort that was successful in the House and very close to passing in the Senate to move its functions under CRS. And for a number of years afterwards, there were also efforts to bring back the OTA either directly, since its authorizing statute remains in effect, or through various kind of hybrid models. And the GAO technology assessment program goes back to 2001 when they decided to allocate $500,000 in dedicated funding for a pilot. It did a first study on biometrics for border security, since security was a very big concern in that year. And this was favorably received in an external evaluation, which said that GAO did a very good job on its inaugural assessment. But the report also raised concerns that the program would face significant challenges to build its own unique culture and scale its capabilities to match the functionality of the OTA. Nonetheless, this pilot was seen as successful. They expanded its funding to $1 million, and it produced a couple of reports each year for the next couple of years. Importantly, there was an effort that came after that in 2004 when Congressman Rush Holt, who's now the head of AAAS, Science Advocacy Group, had a bipartisan bill to formally elevate the GAO pilot program into an office that would have been called the Center for Scientific and Technical Assessment, or CSTA. This was a program, notably in GAO, that would have borrowed a lot of the structural features of the OTA, including its bipartisan, bicameral technology assessment board, which I think was following up to Ranking Member Herrera Butler's point earlier. I think this is an important feature since it gave the Congress broader buy-in to what OTA was doing and strong bipartisan oversight, so its activities couldn't be made politicized or polarized in one direction or the other. Importantly about this sort of, we're going back nearly 2 decades talking about this bill that didn't go anywhere, but it's important in that it involves a lot of the same issues that we're talking about today. It was a proposal that received a lot of vetting and review by the GAO, then Controller General David M. Walker. It was favorably received by members of civil society and academia. They sent it out to review it. And while the effort didn't move forward, I think this was largely because of the very hefty budget requirements that it had. Now, in the years that followed, GAO essentially kept running as a pilot program until it was elevated in last year's appropriations bill. And as you know, this was created the STAA. Now, I think there's been also a lot of criticisms of the GAO program from people who want to revive the OTA, saying that it lacks the robustness and quality of OTA reports, and it also hasn't produced nearly as many of them as the OTA did on an annual basis. And I think while there's at heart, I think, a fair criticism here, it's worth remembering that the GAO program is at a fraction of the OTA's budget, and relatively little structural autonomy until its recent elevation. Now, the primary challenge, I think, that's kept either OTA or GAO's technology assessment program from advancing has been a lack of funding, and I think that problem has been largely addressed thanks to the efforts of Controller General Gene Dodaro and the efforts of this committee. Nonetheless, I think the next challenge for it
Got about 30 seconds to
is
wrap
that
up.
there's a number of structural features it needs to consider that were considered by this last effort in 2004 that Congressman Holt considered, and I outlined some of these in my testimony, and I'd be happy to follow up and discuss them with you.
Great. Thank you, Zach. Appreciate you coming. It doesn't often happen. You get two members and some outside witnesses on a particular issue, which shows how important it is, and we're going to give it a lot of consideration. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next witness is Danielle Schuman, Policy Director, Demand Progress and Demand Progress Action. And on deck is Samantha Feinstein.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, thank you. It's good to be back.
Floor is yours. Yes,
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you again.
Yeah. We had a good year last year.
We had a good year. So you seem to like baseball analogies, so I would say it was a home run.
Just in early April.
Just an early.
Yeah.
So I guess okay.
In the fall, it's football.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So now I know.
That's all right. We're good.
Can I have so I can take some notes on that? As I said, what you did last year was a home run, and I think that is a testament with all the folks that are here. I mean, civil society we're pleased with what you did. I mean, there's just been a tremendous amount of progress. So I wanted to talk about sort of two issues. One concerns the legislative branch bulk data task force, which this committee created in 2013. I know that you guys hate hearing bad news, so here's some good news, which is that this task force has been...
It's not that we hate it, it's just it comes so often. Yeah.
Well, that's why this is an office that's hard for folks to find, right?
All
Like, that's the
Let's hear
value.
some good news.
So it has been a resounding success in making legislative data more available to everyone, and most importantly, and sort of difficult task, has changed the culture inside Congress. The task force has successfully fostered collaboration across many of the support offices and agencies that previously had been siloed. And of course, since I'm here, it's not just good news, there's always an ask. And the ask is, since it has been so successful, we suggest that you expand its scope and mission a little bit from the bulk data task force to the Congressional data task force. And the idea here is that an expanded mission would allow it to look at how data is handled throughout the legislative branch, and this could help Congress better manage its crushing workload. And as a piece of that, so Congress recently passed legislation, the OpenGov Data Act, that created chief data officers throughout all the federal agencies, and we think that might be time for Congress to have one too. So our suggestion is a legislative branch chief data officer that would help support the mission of the task force and sort of would look at access to information questions generally. Our second request concerns the Library of Congress. We recommend creating an advisory committee that focuses on how the library publishes legislative information. There's no doubt that the Library of Congress plays an important role as a legislative information source. Not everyone can travel to Capitol Hill to see what's going on, so of course we must bring Congress to Ohio, and my testimony would have been better, and to Washington State, but we'll just say Ohio for now, and all around the country. But unfortunately, the library, at least in our experience, has not made innovating around access to legislative information a priority, and I think this is a real missed opportunity. We believe the library should be leading the charge here. We know that there's good people at the library. They are trying to support the library's mission. I mean, librarians are all about access to information. It's not surprising that this would be something that they would care about. We want them to be empowered. Dr. Hayden, when she was here a couple weeks ago, testified about her commitment to increasing access to the Congress's library. I think that's great. But it does require a change in how the library does business. Fortunately, there's a well-worn model for agencies to help transform their culture. And at its heart is improved communication with stakeholders inside and out. Many legislative and executive branch agencies routinely meet with external stakeholders. There's more than a federal advisory committee, so this isn't exactly a new thing. Inside the legislative branch, we've seen this work. We were just talking about the bulk data task force. That's an example of where internal and external conversations are effective. There's the Advisory Committee on the Records of Congress that exists between the House and the Senate. There's the Federal Depository Library Council. In the executive branch, there's the FOIA Advisory Committee, and the archivist himself meets regularly with civil society. But when the library participates in the bulk data task force, its engagement is often limited, reflecting both its internal silos and, at least on some folks, like a reluctance to speak. So to our knowledge, the Library of Congress does not regularly convene a wide range of tech-savvy stakeholders on its role as a source of legislative information. We think that should change. We believe that it's important to build a bridge between the library and civil society on innovation around access to information. This information, after all, belongs to and belongs with the American people, wherever they might be. See, now I can stick it in, whether it's in Ohio or in Washington. Hi. And we believe that creating an advisory committee would be a good first step. And including this should be representatives from inside the library, as well as functional units, as well as civil society. This is not just our recommendation. The Lincoln Network, who just testified previously, GovTrack, Sunlight Foundation, R Street Institute, PopFox, BBC Action, and Quorum, and many others have endorsed this recommendation. I'm so pleased to be back here. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify, and I'm happy and looking forward to our conversation.
Well, we appreciate it. And again, you were here last year, I believe, with one or two others.
Yes.
A little team. And I know Chairman Yoder and I had a lot of conversations after your testimony, and we did what we did and tried to follow through the best we can. So I just want to say thank you. A lot of people think that these public hearings don't matter and that we're not listening, but we are. At least we are on this committee. I can assure you that. And you being back here is important. And again, we don't really know how tough the budget is. We just know it's going to be tough. And this is a priority for the committee in a lot of different ways, but it's competing with a lot of other priorities too. So thank you for being here, Mr. Butler. All right. Thank you, sir.
And can I just add one quick thing?
Sure.
There was a letter signed by 38 civil society organizations and 10 former members of Congress on the 302B allocation question. It is something that we will continue to pursue because we think the work of this committee is incredibly important. We think that the legislative branch should be appropriately funded.
Appreciate that. Thank you. We're trying to offset our power with the power of the executive, and sometimes it gets really hard.
So thank you so much.
Yeah, appreciate your time. All right, next up, Senior Legal and International Analyst, Government Accountability Project, Samantha Feinstein.
Chairman
Floor is
Ryan,
yours.
it's nice to be back.
Yeah,
Thanks
nice to
for
see you
having
again.
me. I'm part of the Team Transparency, so I guess I'm the next batter up.
All
Yeah,
right.
Team Transparency.
Not a bad team.
No.
Last year, I testified for this committee about the need to establish an office to assist Congress in working with whistleblowers in a secure way, and we appreciate all of the tremendous work that you guys have done since then to raise the profile of the importance of the need to protect congressional communications with whistleblowers. Since we last met, your committee ordered or directed the Government Accountability Office to do a study on congressional communications with whistleblowers. We believe that will be made publicly available soon. Also, since then, in the 116th Congress, the House established an Office of the Whistleblower Ombudsman. I'm here today to request for fiscal year 2020 $1 million to allow the House Office of the Whistleblower Ombudsman to hit the ground running and have the support that it needs. The Ombudsman will be in charge of developing best practices for communicating with whistleblowers and processing their intakes when they contact your offices. And it'll also be responsible for training congressional offices in how to protect whistleblowers and their confidentiality. The funding would allow the office to support their staff and expenses, develop and maintain a website, develop training materials, develop materials on how to process whistleblower intakes to their offices, and it would also allow them to consult with subject matter experts to help improve the quality of the office's services. We also request that you ask that some of this funding be dedicated to exploring technological developments as far as making sure that when whistleblowers contact any office or committee, that communication is secure technologically. And so we'd like some of that funding to go towards exploring that mechanism so that whistleblowers can trust that their information will be safely handled. As you know, whistleblowers are a vital lifeline to information from Congress. They're witnesses firsthand of waste, fraud, abuse, mismanagement, illegality, and other corrupt nonsense. And no one else is going to tell you. So we've got to protect communications with whistleblowers. In recent years, under the False Claims Act, whistleblowers have helped the government recover $3 to $5 billion a year. So we think that it's really important to have a robust ombuds.
Federal government?
Federal government.
Wow.
No. So we.
That's real money even around here. Just
sure
think what we
is.
could do in this committee with that extra money, huh?
Yeah, well, so I think that, Congress would receive more disclosures if there were more protections for whistleblowers. And this is just the first step in that. And so we think that, whistleblowers right now, unfortunately, risk a lot when they come to Congress. They risk their careers. They risk their personal life. It can really destroy their career to come forward and get caught. And the level of intensity of the retaliation against whistleblowers, can be directly tied to the threat that their employer perceives them. So if they go public, it can be really risky business for them. We don't want that to happen. And we think that this office will really give whistleblowers the confidence that they need to know that their communication is being handled responsibly. So I also just wanted to mention that this request has been put forth in consultation with the House Whistleblower Protection Caucus and has received bipartisan support. You've received a letter from Representative Speer, Meadows, and Representative Rice in support of this budget. So we thank you for your thoughtful consideration, and I look forward to working with you to strengthen this vital lifeline of communications to Congress.
Thank you. We appreciate the testimony. We've seen over the last year or two how really important in this kind of environment this is.
Yeah.
And I think not just in the legislative branch, but I think when you talk about reforming government to provide these kind of protections for people who are really on the inside and really know how things work, and it becomes difficult for us sometimes when we have quick hearings, whether it's in this committee or even other committees that we have. It's so hard to fully grasp the intricacies of the bureaucracy. But somebody living in that space for a while has the answers, and I think can really help us. And I think we're at a point where we do need to, on both sides of the aisle, figure out how we reform this beast called the United States federal government. And this is obviously very important. So thank you for taking the time to come and spend with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Next up is Policy Council for the Project on Government Oversight. Rebecca Jones.
Good afternoon. Also here is part of Team Transparency, card-carrying member. So thank you for the opportunity to testify on improving access to the work of Inspectors General for the legislative branch. Public access to the work of IGs is a critical facet of government transparency, and publication of this work results in both more accountability and more effective oversight. I'm here to request that the subcommittee adopt report language that requires the Inspectors General of the House of Representatives and the U.S. Capitol Police to publish their reports online. Before I begin, I'd like to quickly express our support for the House Office of the Whistleblower Ombudsman and to echo the testimony of Samantha Feinstein. Founded in 1981, the Project on Government Oversight works to strengthen the effectiveness and accountability of the federal government through independent, fact-based investigation and analysis. We feel that the funding and publicizing the independent work of IGs is paramount to achieving these goals. Inspectors General conduct independent investigations, audits, and inspections into waste, fraud, and abuse, and provide recommendations to improve federal programs. As a result of this work, IGs claim an average return on investment of approximately $17 for every dollar invested. In accordance with the Inspector General Act, most do this while also keeping Congress and the public apprised of their work and the problems they uncover. Under the Inspector General Act as amended, most IGs are required to publish on their website any audit, inspection, or evaluation report they create within 3 days. By publishing these reports, IGs keep the public, including groups like POGO, informed of government waste, fraud, and abuse. This allows the public to call out wasteful or illegal practices and to increase pressure for swift change. In effect, publication greatly increases the influence of IG's work. But not all IGs are subject to these reporting requirements. Two such IGs are those of the House of Representatives and the Capitol Police. While these watchdogs provide independent oversight of the operations of both entities, they do not make their reports, findings, or recommendations readily available to the public. In fact, hardly any of their reports are available on their websites, and therefore are not easily accessible even to some congressional staff. To rectify this lack of transparency, we ask that the subcommittee adopt report language requiring these IGs to follow the Inspector General Act's 3-day rule for posting reports publicly on their own website and on the federal government-wide website, oversight.gov. Managed by the Council of Inspectors General on Integrity and Efficiency, oversight.gov hosts reports from the vast majority of federal inspectors general, including 4 of the legislative branch IGs, in a centralized and searchable database. POGO recognizes, of course, that due to classification or privacy concerns, not all IG reports can be fully released to the public. However, several executive branch IGs and other oversight institutions have found ways to restrict access to sensitive reports without keeping the public in the dark about the report's existence. For example, the Government Accountability Office, the Department of Justice, and the Department of Defense Inspectors General currently provide basic information such as report title or report number in cases where some or all of a report's content must remain non-public. While this is not yet an IG-wide practice, if the Department of Defense, which produces a large number of classified reports, and the Department of Justice, which reports on law enforcement matters, can provide this level of transparency, arguably any IG should be able to. The House and Capitol Police IGs are no exception. The work of inspectors general should not be done in secret. It's critical that lawmakers and the public have access to IG reports in order to correct wasteful or abusive practices. Further, because the legislative branch staff do not benefit from the whistleblower protections that the executive branch staff do, and because the House of Representatives and the Capitol Police are not subject to FOIA requests, these IGs are the public's only option to measure the accountability of these legislative branch entities. POGO therefore asks that the subcommittee consider including report language requiring these IGs to publish past and future reports. We've prepared suggested written report language to accomplish these goals, which is attached to my testimony. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I look forward to your questions.
Again, thank you. We're lucky to have so many people testifying today talking about these kind of things, about transparency and all the rest, especially when it comes to these reports. So we will continue the conversation with you. This is important to us.
Can I ask a question?
Sure can.
So you're specifically honing in on Capitol Police and Ledge Branch IGs?
The Capitol Police and the House IGs.
In the House, okay. Why would, so the House, I can kind of see how that gets murky, right? Because they can talk about, FOIA stuff. How does the Capitol Police fit under there? Is it just something that's not been done? Or are they claiming some sort of a privilege?
So not
Do you
that.
understand the question's a little fuzzy?
Sure,
Do you
so
get what
why
I'm-
wouldn't they post
Yeah.
their reports online? I can't really say. I think that it may have something to do with the fact that it's law enforcement, but again, because the DOJ posts their reports online, even if they are classified, they'll post at least a number or a title or something about
That
the report
something
so that you can
occurred,
know.
yeah.
Right, so even if congressional staff 5 years down the line want to look into these issues, they have no idea that the reports even exist. So we think it would be a relatively small ask for Capitol Police IGs to.
Can I ask one more question?
Please.
The transparency team, are you all with different organizations or?
We are. We're just saying transparency team
Okay.
to be fun. But
Okay.
They're branding themselves.
we are somewhat branding ourselves, but I know at least
And
that.
they look millennial, so
yeah. Gotta have a
I'm just
brand.
gonna follow that.
I'll take it. I know that several of our organizations are very supportive of publicizing the work
Okay.
of IGs. And I know
Okay.
specifically
Okay.
that Demand Progress has worked.
Okay.
At least for the House IGs,
Got it.
have reported on
Got
their
it.
lack of publication.
Perfect, thank you.
Great.
Appreciate that.
I just want to add the thanks generally to all of you because you mentioned millennials and, I mean, it's important to, it's important to have beliefs and come and engage the government and make the change. And as we said to someone who testified here a little before you, we actually implemented it. And I mean, that's how this is supposed to
That's how we
work.
learn.
We're all engaged in this, endeavor and trying to create a more perfect union, and sometimes it's in really small rooms somewhere in the Capitol. With dark, yeah, but with nice views, that it actually happens. So we
Absolutely.
appreciate what you're doing.
We're so
So
appreciative
thank
of
you.
the opportunity.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Rebecca. Next up, Program Director from the Congressional App Challenge, Joseph Alessi.
Alessi, that's right.
Alessi. Is that Italian?
Yes.
All right.
Sicilian.
Oh. Request granted? No. Immediately?
All right. I'd like
Floor is
to-
yours.
Thank you. Chairman Ryan, Ranking Member Herb Butler, thank you for allowing me to testify today. I am the Program Director of the Congressional App Challenge, which you did hear a bit about earlier, so I'll try to avoid being redundant. But we are an officially sanctioned competition of the House of Representatives. We're a coding competition for middle and high school students that aims to create a domestic pipeline of STEM talent in every district and in every corner of the United States. In 4 short years, this program of the House of Representatives has grown exponentially. Student registrations and functioning apps built have tripled since 2015. And the Congressional App Challenges were held in more than half of the congressional districts in the United States last year. Both of you participate in the Congressional App Challenge, and your winning apps from this year are actually a great example of the diversity of the content that this contest brings about.
What were your peoples?
Yeah, Chairman Ryan, you're, the Anonymous Security Center, your students' coding app called the Anonymous Security Center, where students can anonymously report security threats to school administrators. And Ranking Member Herb Butler.
Ours was about fish.
Yeah, yours
How
was
to take
fish.
care of your fish. We're from the Northwest.
The fundamentals of fish care.
Ba-dum-bum.
I don't know how to do that.
There you go.
They die, those pets die all the time.
I know,
One of the ways
I know.
that the kids become more fun.
Yeah, and so obviously those are vastly different apps, but that's the beauty of the competition. The students aren't bound by guidelines about what they can code or where they can code or what the subject matter needs to be. It doesn't stifle the creative instincts, and so it allows a passion for STEM, for computer science, for coding to flourish in these students. As I mentioned, we're creating a diverse pipeline of computer science talent. A full 1/3 of the Congressional App Challenge was held in districts last year that have sizable rural populations. So those are either districts that are qualify as pure rural or rural suburban. Nearly 90% of states hosted at least one app challenge in 2018. And against Silicon Valley's best diversity metrics,
A lot of ladies, we have the girls on this one.
against their best diversity metrics, participants in the Congressional App Challenge are 4 times as likely to identify as Black, 3 times as likely to identify as Latinx, twice as likely to identify as female, and 3.3% of our participants last year identified as Native American or Native Alaskan. And Silicon Valley's numbers are low to the point that last we checked, they were unable to measure them. And that really hammers on the point of how diverse of a competition this is, both geographically, across lines of race, across every category that you can imagine. It's also worth mentioning that 44% of our participants from last year's competition describe themselves as beginners. So this is a bridge for students to learn more about computer science and coding and potentially explore a career path in the future. It's an opportunity to inspire those students, not just highlight those who already have an interest in the subject matter. We are at an inflection point, both as a nation and as a program. I'm not going to belabor the need for computer science and STEM talent in the United States. I think Congresswoman Eshoo did a great job of that earlier. But I will mention, as she mentioned, that the growth of this program has outstripped our ability at IEF, the foundation that administers it, to administer it. Serious investment in both program infrastructure and outreach are needed to help this program reach its full potential. Only a small investment is needed. We are a full-time office of only 2 people, and we currently rely on self-sourced private sector funding for 100% of our funds to make this contest possible. I'd like to imagine what would be possible at this time with critical support from this committee and from the House of Representatives to own a program that is a program of the House of Representatives. We are just scratching the surface of this program's potential. So, to sum things up, I just want to say this program really it deserves more than free solutions like spreadsheets and Google Forms daisy-chained together by a small team of professional staff and interns. We've already seen some of the talent that's come out of the Congressional App Challenge, and I'd like to imagine what we can uncover with additional resources. And thank you both for your time. I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you. Phenomenal. We love this. Obviously, we got some challenges as far as trying to fund all of these great programs, but this is something we're, I think, all in love with. And if you could share those exact statistics with us again, I want to make sure, commit those to memory.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
I'd be happy to
so-
do that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Bueno.
Grazie.
Prego. It's the extent of my Italian. Next is Kel McClanahan. Speaking of Italian, Kel McClanahan is our next. I'm half Irish too, though, so we're good. Yeah. Executive Director, National Security Counselors. Kel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ranking Member and Chairman, for inviting me here. I'm here to talk about what should be a relatively non-controversial idea, the idea that the Government Accountability Office, GAO, has the ability to investigate all agencies at the federal government. This is something that should be the case, but unfortunately is not. There is a large portion of the federal government, the intelligence community, that regularly refuses to cooperate. And this has gone back decades that I won't go into. It's in my written testimony. The gist of it is, in 2001, they came and testified that we discounted such work on an investigation they'd been asked to do because the CIA was not providing us with sufficient access to information to perform our mission. This was 2001. They had to make a conscious decision not to further pursue the issue, and in fact commented that when they had managed to get information, it was only through subterfuge, saying that they requested threat assessments so that the CIA, quote, does not perceive our audits as oversight of its activities. And fast forward to 2008, you have a fight again where they say, we foresee no major change in limits in our access without substantial support from Congress, the request of the vast majority of our work. Well, the reason for this goes back to a 1988 Office of Legal Counsel opinion that says that intelligence is the executive discharge of its constitutional foreign policy responsibilities, not its statutory responsibilities, and therefore it is not, quote, a program or activity the government carries out under existing law, which is how they explained removing it from GAO jurisdiction. So this has been tried to be fixed many times in the past, most recently in 2010, when the fiscal year 2010 Intelligence Authorization Act actually added in the House version language that said that the Director of National Intelligence shall cooperate with GAO and shall direct intelligence agencies to do so. OMB threatened to veto it, citing the OLC opinion, and Comptroller General Gene Dodaro wrote a detailed memo refuting this analysis and saying that it has greatly impeded GAO's work for the intelligence committees and also jeopardizes some of GAO's work for other committees of jurisdiction, including armed services, appropriations, judiciary, and foreign relations, among others. But Congress decided to give the executive another chance, and they included a provision in the final bill that directed the DNI to formulate a policy about this. And the DNI created Intelligence Community Directive 114, which said that intelligence agencies shall only cooperate with GAO on matters that don't fall within the purview of the Congressional Intelligence Oversight Committees, which means that GAO can only investigate things that the intelligence committees can't, which is basically nothing. So we're back where we started. Well, this is a problem for a few reasons. Number one, it's a logistical problem. In 2009, there were 199 staffers at GAO with top secret clearances and 96 with sensitive compartmented information clearances. In 2018, there were 35 Senate Intelligence Committee staffers and 37 House Intelligence Committee staffers. There are more people at GAO with SCI clearances than the entire staff of HIPSI and SISI put together. And this isn't just us. Mr. Dodaro has come and testified about this many times. I testified with Chairman Ryan and then Chairman Yoder last year. And after my testimony, Chairman Yoder asked Mr. Dodaro about this and asked if they needed additional support from Congress or direction to the intelligence agencies. And he said yes. And then this year, Chairman Ryan, thank you very much. You asked Mr. Dodaro again, have this improved? And he said that the IC has gotten a little bit better when an Intel committee is involved, but that they have more difficulties when the request comes from non-intelligence committees. And that's an understatement. In fact, in the last 5 years, an intelligence agency has refused to give information to GAO in 2 cases and given it only after what Mr. Dodaro called excessive delays in 13 cases. And those cases were both mandates and requests from committee chairs from both intelligence committees, the Homeland Security Government Affairs Committee of the Senate, the Homeland Security Committee of the House, both Judiciary Committees, both Appropriations Committees, the Foreign Relations Committee of the Senate, and the House Foreign Affairs Committee. So basically, any committee that could conceivably have any degree of jurisdiction over the Intelligence Committee is being rebuffed. And bottom line, can I finish?
Yeah.
These artificial restrictions on GAO's authority are causing Congress to expend more financial and manpower resources to accomplish less oversight. So in effect, I'm not asking you for money. I'm asking you to do something through report language or statutory language that will save you money that you could then spend on all of these other worthy programs that people are asking you for money for. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Kel, we appreciate your testimony here and all your good work. Thank you so much. And on behalf of everyone else here that may get the money from your savings, they thank you as well. But we appreciate you sticking to this. It's a really important issue, so thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Next up, Mandy Smithberger, Director, Center for Defense Information at the Project on Government Oversight. And on deck is Gabe Cazares.
You guys are getting close to the end. I'm your Ohio millennial.
All right. Where are you from?
Columbus.
All right. Very good.
Thank you so much, Chairman Ryan and Ranking Member Herrera Butler, for allowing me to testify today on behalf of the Project on Government Oversight and demand progress on strengthening Congress's capacity to conduct oversight on matters of national security. We respectfully urge your committee to provide adequate resources so that personal office staff or members of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, the House Appropriations Defense Subcommittee, and the House Armed Services Committee can receive the clearances necessary to properly oversee intelligence and other national security agencies. Without personal office congressional staff with TSSCI clearances for members on those committees, many of the members are overseeing the executive branch blindfolded. In addition, we urge the committee to require a public-facing report detailing the cost of providing these clearances to one staff member for every member of the House. Before I worked for the House, I was in the intelligence community, and I appreciate how important it is to properly protect sensitive national security information. I also know that Congress needs more resources to perform its constitutional oversight duties. We signed that letter that Daniel was talking about on allocations. The reform that we're talking about here, particularly for House Intelligence, is already implemented in the Senate Intelligence Committee, and it's overdue to be adopted in the House. Both the chair and the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee have expressed concerns about inadequate resources, and the chair of the committee has said that he finds the idea of designees appealing. As this committee is well aware, the legislative branch receives approximately 0.4% of the discretionary federal budget to oversee the entire federal government. For comparison, the intelligence community requested about $86 billion this year, or 18 times that amount. So you guys are outgunned, and the more resources that you can have to make sure that you're preventing waste, fraud, and abuse, I think the better and safer we're all going to be. While we believe that every committee is under-resourced, that problem is particularly acute for the House Intelligence Committee because we can't count on the press, civil society, or other stakeholders to fill in the gaps to help Congress uncover waste, fraud, and abuse. History has shown that while Congress has curtailed its own access to national security information, the number of executive branch employees and contractors accessing this information has exploded. The most recent public data showed about 1.2 million people had TS clearances, and about half of those were contractors. While we don't know the full scope of how many legislative branch staffers have this information, we'd urge Congress to track and publicly disclose that information. Even if our proposed reform was adopted, the number of cleared staff is unlikely to increase the total number significantly.
The costs are also likely to be minimal. The 3 committees we're identifying here have fewer than 100 members. It's our understanding that the cost for providing staff at DSS-CI clearance is largely borne by the CIA, and the cost of investigating and adjudicating those clearances is around $5,000 for someone who's never held one. We do anticipate that there would be some funding needed for legislative branch to maintain records of non-disclosure agreements, to store classified documents, and track individuals granted clearance. We urge the committee to increase funds for the Sergeant at Arms accordingly. But since most of the personal office staff of the relevant committees likely already have TS clearances, providing additional access should not be overly burdensome. It's of paramount importance, though, to make sure that increased access is handled responsibly. And so we would also urge the committee to have increased counterintelligence training akin to what we see in the executive branch, and to include in that training the reminder that congressional staff have the same duties to protect the sensitive information. As I described in my written testimony, former members of the committee from both sides of the aisle have described how difficult it can be to target questions for agencies that are naturally secretive. The answer to this problem is to ensure that each member of these key committees has someone who will primarily reflect their interests and their perspectives and act as a confidential sounding board. Empowering personal office staff who will function as designees or shared staff is the obvious and economic solution. Most importantly, implementing a designee system can increase the effectiveness of these committees. Former Senator Saxby Chambliss, who served both on the House Intelligence Committee and was the vice chair of the Senate Committee, said that the designee system increased bipartisan collaboration and made the committee more effective because they could take on more policy portfolio issues. Overall, providing designees or shared staff to members of the House would increase both the capacity and I think the credibility of these committees. As you mentioned earlier, years of executive overreach by both Democratic and Republican administrations have unconstitutionally diminished Congress's role. We're really excited about this committee making sure that you guys get the respect and resources that you need. Congress must reassert itself as a co-equal branch, and that has to start with providing sufficient support to members to perform their constitutional oversight duties. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. This is, I sit on the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee as well. And
thank you for your work on TransTime.
yeah, so there's a perfect example
Yeah.
of what happens in the Department of Defense. And that goes back to the whistleblower testimony that we had. And now your testimony, obviously critically important because, well, for obvious reasons. I think you were very clear about it. So thank you for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you so much for having me.
OH.
IO.
All right. Next witness, Director for the National Federation of the Blind, Gabe Cazares. Is that right?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you for having me. I'm your disability community millennial.
All right, there you go.
My name is Gabe Cazares. I'm the manager of government affairs at the National Federation of the Blind, and I appreciate this opportunity to propose 2 appropriations be made to the National Library Service for the Blind and Physically Handicapped, NLS, in order to fund their program to distribute refreshable Braille displays, or e-readers, to their patrons, and to enhance the capacity of the Braille and audio reading download BARD service. The NLS is the primary provider of reading material for over 800,000 Americans who are blind or have other physical disabilities that make it impossible for them to read print. An appropriation of $2.375 million over a 5-year period to NLS for the e-reader program will save money and lead to the proliferation of critically needed materials for Braille materials for blind Americans. Currently, there are hard copy offerings, but new low-cost displays, or e-readers, similar to the one I am actively using at this moment to read my testimony, can produce electronic Braille, saving money, saving paper, and providing a small device where formerly multiple and large volumes were required for just one book. Moreover, a 2016 GAO report titled Library Services for Those with Disabilities indicated that the cost of embossing, housing, and shipping hard copy Braille volumes was $17 million annually. That same GAO report estimates that the refreshable Braille e-reader program and electronically distributed books will incur an annual cost of $7 million. That is an annual savings of $10 million over the current system. In an effort to enhance and expand the availability of Braille and audio formats, the NLS launched the Braille and Audio Download Service, or BARD. BARD allows patrons to download materials from the NLS catalog onto a compatible book player, such as the NLS Digital Talking Book Player, onto their personal computers, or onto the BARD mobile application available for Android and iOS devices. According to NLS, 45,484 patrons are currently subscribed to the BARD service, which holds 108,450 books in its collection. Both numbers are expected to increase. However, the existing infrastructure that supports the BARD service is at capacity. In order to fully harness the potential of the BARD service, both hardware and software upgrades are necessary. An appropriation of $5 million over a 3-year period to NLS will allow NLS to make the necessary upgrades that will enable the BARD service to keep up with increasing patron demand. An upgraded BARD service will also allow for seamless interaction between the service and the NLS e-reader program. On behalf of the 50,000 members of the National Federation of the Blind, I strongly urge you to support these 2 appropriation requests. And thank you for your consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Gabe, thank you so much for your testimony. I'm going to ask you to do something a little out of the ordinary. Can you explain to us how that works? I know we've done this offline, but I think it's an important technology, and it's important for people to see how this works. So.
Sure. So this is a machine that operates with electronic pins. And as I am panning back and forth through the document that I was just reading, I can read a line of Braille at a time. And every time I pan to the next line, the pins reform into the new cells.
So you hit, there's 2 little gray things on the side there, and you hit those when you're done reading the line, and it pops up the next line.
That's right.
Basically.
And the memory is stored in an SD card back here. And I can just plug this into the computer, put in my files, swap out files, and this is how the system works.
Well, you're very fluent in it.
Thanks.
That's excellent. Well, thank you for your testimony.
Yes,
this
sir.
is Congressman Yoder, Chairman Yoder last year, and I. This is a very important aspect of what happens at the Library of Congress and National Library Service and for our country. So we appreciate you coming up to the Hill and testifying and trying to make a difference here. So we appreciate all your good work.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right. That's it. Thank you, everyone, for being here and accessing and advocating your government. Hearing's adjourned.